The winter storm had left the entire city stunned. Overnight, a curtain of ice had draped itself across rooftops, power lines, and cars, freezing the world into silence. Branches hung heavy with icicles, driveways became treacherous skating rinks, and even the most powerful machines seemed fragile against nature's handiwork. But nowhere was the storm's effect more dramatic than outside billionaire Richard Vance's sprawling estate, where his prized possession, a one-of-a-kind Italian supercar, sat imprisoned in a glittering tomb of ice. The car wasn't just expensive, it was legendary. Painted in a rare metallic shade that shifted between silver and sapphire depending on the light, its aerodynamic frame looked like it belonged in a futuristic museum. It was a model so rare. Malik's knuckles tapped against the car's surface with a rhythm so steady it seemed almost like music. The sound was soft at first, barely audible under the crowd's chuckles and the billionaire's impatient scoffs. Yet, as the vibrations traveled through the frozen layers, something began to shift. The single droplet of rainwater, shimmering against the ice, quivered unnaturally, as though alive. Then it spread, not downward, as normal water would, but outward, tracing fine cracks through the frost like lightning branching across a night sky. The laughter faltered. People leaned closer, squinting. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. The droplet was melting the ice, but not in the messy, slow way they were used to. Instead, the ice seemed to respond to it, fracturing and softening in precise patterns where Malik's rhythmic tapping guided it. Richard Vance narrowed his eyes, his arrogance giving way to curiosity. What is this?" he muttered, stepping closer to the boy. Malik didn't answer. His focus was absolute. Another droplet fell, this one sliding smoothly into the cracks the first had made, deepening the reaction. The ice gave a faint crack that echoed through the driveway. The workers who had given up earlier now stared, wide-eyed, their tools forgotten in their hands. Malik adjusted his rhythm, shifting the taps into a faster cadence. With each beat, the droplets seemed to resonate, vibrating microscopically as though remembering the very patterns he had trained them to respond to. Within minutes, sheets of ice began to loosen and slip away from the car's sleek body, falling to the ground in sharp fragments. Gasps rose from the crowd as the once entombed machine started to reveal its gleaming paintwork beneath. The billionaire's jaw tightened. For the first time, he wasn't in control of the situation, this boy was. He could see that Malik wasn't guessing or stumbling into luck, he was working with precision, as if he had rehearsed this very process countless times. "Who taught you this?" Vance demanded, but Malik didn't lift his gaze. The boy's mind was replaying the countless afternoons spent in his tiny apartment, collecting jars of rainwater, experimenting with sound and vibration. He remembered when others mocked him for wasting his time, when even his mother worried he was chasing nonsense. But Malik had known there was something in the way rain moved, the way droplets carried patterns from their fall, and how they could be made to sing when combined with rhythm. He had discovered that water could be trained to unlock itself from bonds most thought unbreakable. By the time he let the last drop fall, the car was free. The final shards of ice clattered onto the driveway, scattering like glass under the watching eyes of the crowd. The billionaire's supercar gleamed once more, freed from its icy prison. For a moment, there was silence, no one moved, no one spoke. All eyes were fixed on Malik, the small boy with the oversized jacket, who stood quietly with his dented tin and nearly empty vial. Then came the whispers. "Did you see that?" One man muttered. "That wasn't natural." Another shook his head in disbelief. "No way a kid just did that, no way." Some thought it was a trick. Others thought they had witnessed something bordering on science fiction. But Malik himself looked calm, as though what had just happened was ordinary, something he expected all along. Richard Vance stepped forward, his polished shoes crunching on the broken ice. His eyes, sharp and calculating, fixed on the boy. He wasn't laughing anymore. "How did you do that?" he asked, his voice quieter now, edged with curiosity instead of mockery. Malik looked up, his gaze steady. "I told you," he said simply. "Raindrops." The billionaire's lips curled into a thin line. "Don't play games with me, boy. I've paid entire teams of scientists who couldn't manage what you just did in 5 minutes. Explain yourself." But Malik didn't explain, not fully. He knew what he had discovered wasn't something to be thrown carelessly into greedy hands. Instead, he only said, "Rain remembers. If you listen to it, if you give it rhythm, it will do what others can't." The crowd erupted into murmurs again, their confusion deepening. Some scoffed, others leaned in as though desperate for more. But Malik didn't elaborate. The billionaire, however, was not so easily dismissed. He crouched slightly. The air hung thick with disbelief as the last shards of ice slipped away from the billionaire's supercar, clattering against the stone driveway like broken glass. Malik straightened slowly, his small hands red from the cold but steady, his expression calm despite the stunned silence pressing in from all sides. For a moment, no one moved. The crowd, which had been buzzing with laughter and ridicule just minutes earlier, now stared at the boy as if he had performed a miracle. Richard Vance stepped forward, his polished shoes crunching on the frozen fragments. His face was unreadable, an unusual sight for a man whose every gesture was the silence after Malik freed the car was heavy, almost surreal, as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. The billionaire's gleaming machine, moments ago trapped in nature's grip, now stood unbound, glistening under the pale winter sun as though mocking the futility of all the failed efforts before. Malik stood quietly, shoulders squared, refusing to flinch under the weight of so many eyes fixed on him. He wasn't gloating, he wasn't smiling, he simply stood there, a boy who knew he had done what no one else could. Richard Vance's lips pressed into a tight line. The crowd waited for him to speak, to shower the boy with praise, or at least acknowledge the astonishing scene that had just unfolded. But instead, the billionaire tilted his head, skepticism clouding his sharp gaze. "Luck," he muttered at last, his voice clipped. "Some strange reaction. That's all this is. Don't think for a second that you're some kind of genius." The murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Some nodded at the billionaire's dismissal, unwilling to believe a child could understand something that professionals had failed at. But others, the workers who had tried and failed, the neighbors who had seen Malik tinkering with broken electronics in alleyways, saw the look in his eyes and knew this wasn't chance. Malik had solved a puzzle no one else could, and he had done it with confidence. Malik didn't argue, he simply lifted the battered tin from his pocket again, tilting it gently so the tiny vial inside caught the light. "It's not luck," he said quietly. His voice wasn't boastful, it was calm, steady, unshaken. "Water listens, you just don't know how to hear it." The words were strange, almost poetic, but they lodged in the air with weight. Vance scoffed, but the quiet murmur of the crowd deepened. People had seen what they had seen, and no dismissal could erase it. One of the workers stepped forward, wiping frost from his beard. "Kid," he said, his tone half disbelief, half admiration, "how'd you learn to do that?" "I've been de-icing vehicles for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like it." Malik's gaze flickered downward. He thought of his tiny apartment, the shelves lined with jars of rainwater, the notebooks filled with scribbled diagrams, and the countless nights he had gone to bed hungry but awake, listening to the rain against the glass. "I watch," he said simply. "Rain doesn't fall the same way twice. Every drop carries something different. If you pay attention, you learn its patterns. And if you match them," he tapped the side of the car lightly with his knuckles, a soft echo ringing back, "you can tell it what to do." The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers, the words spreading like wildfire. Some shook their heads, unwilling to believe, while others looked at the boy with newfound awe. Vance, however, was unmoved. He crossed his arms. "Even if what you're saying is true, it doesn't matter. You're just a boy. Knowledge without power is worthless." His tone dripped with dismissal, but there was a flicker in his eyes, fear, maybe, or envy, that betrayed more than he wanted anyone to know. Malik met his gaze. For the first time, the boy allowed a faint smile to tug at the corner of his lips. "Maybe power isn't about owning things," he replied. "Maybe it's about understanding them." The crowd fell silent again, the weight of his words settling deeper than anyone expected from a 12-year-old. Vance opened his mouth, ready to retort, but for once he had no immediate response. His face tightened, and he turned sharply toward his mansion, muttering orders to his staff to inspect the car. As the billionaire disappeared behind the ornate doors, the workers and neighbors slowly turned their attention back to Malik. No longer was he just the quiet boy from the other side of town, he was something else now, an enigma, a prodigy, a boy with a secret that defied reason. Malik tucked the tin carefully back into his pocket and pulled his oversized jacket tighter around him. Without another word, he walked away from the mansion gates, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. The crowd parted for him, some reaching out with questions, others just staring, but he didn't stop. He knew he couldn't explain everything, not yet. The world wasn't ready for what he had discovered. Because this was just the beginning. If rainwater could be taught to unlock ice, what else could it do? And Malik, the boy no one had noticed, carried a secret that not even a billionaire could buy.